Over the engine, where to check oil filters, fuel filters, things like that. So our oil fill is down here. Obviously the dipstick is right here, pretty self-explanatory. It runs 2 fuel filters and 1 big oil filter here. It does have a block heater located down in here, if you guys want to come and take a look. So our block heater is down underneath the engine, mounted down underneath there. This is where it brings fluid down in, and the other side it pushes it back through. Just keeps the block warm, like I said, to make sure that when we do start this engine, it starts quick. It keeps it at a constant temp. So when it does start, it fires up quick. Nothing sucks more than a cold diesel, right? That is why there also is an alarm. If the temperature does get low, you can pay attention to the block heater, make sure. If anything needs to be done with the hoses, changing hoses, there are shut-off valves on here that shut this off. Obviously you want to shut the block heater, turn the block heater circuit off first, then you have a valve here and you'll have a valve on the other side, the shut off valve. That way if the hose ever cracks or, you know, anything you needed, it's been 5 years, got to change the hoses out. You know, hoses will deteriorate over time. You do have shut off valves that keeps it so it's a lot cleaner. You might have to top it off with a gallon of coolant after, but because you're going to have some left in the hose and as well in the block heater.
Is it labeled on here where the block heater circuit is?
The like actual stickered block heater? No. You mean on the circuit breakers?
Yeah, is it labeled on here so you know where to shut it off then?
Rosenden would be the ones to answer that question.
What was the question?
Is it labeled
for the
here
block
where
heater.
the block heater circuit is? Is it labeled out here on the
It's
generator?
labeled out here and by the breaker.
On the breaker itself,
Yep,
okay.
yep.
Yeah, that's definitely a question for Rosenden to answer on that one. This is a turbocharged engine. You can see the turbo here. Air filter is over there. I'll show you the air filter when we move to the other side of the engine. This does have a bowl on the bottom of the first primary fuel filter, the water separator here. This does run red dye diesel, so if there is water, you know water is going to sit at the bottom of that bowl because tanks are going to accumulate condensation over time. So you may see a little bit of water in there. There is a drain here that can be drained out. You want to go ahead and drain the water out of the bottom of that and then close it back up. This does also have a sensor, so if it does get water in there, it's going to alert on the panel here. Let's see, anything else on this side. All of our fuel supply, fuel return, everything is located here. Tank alarms, things like that. Your fuel level alarms are all located here. Thermostats are here. Those would be changed probably, about every 5 years. You know, cooling system service, things like that. Every 3 to 5 years, depending on how well it's maintained, obviously. This is a little tight in here, so you would want to bring a ladder up here, but our coolant fill is up here in the top. Our radiator is right here. Coolant fill is on the top. This is a split core radiator, so you have your aftercooler on one side, or intercooler, and you have a radiator on one side. But the fill, there actually is a sight glass. If you get a flashlight, you can take a look. There is a sight glass up here that you can see the coolant level through the little sight glass. The coolant will be blue. It is a blue ELC that is used now in all the Kohler generators. It is an extended life coolant. It should be good for 3 to 5 years. After that point, you do want to do a cooling system service as well anyway, because the coolant does sit quite a bit. It is circulated through the block heater, but it is good to do that just to keep the engine running nice and clean. Any questions on this side, guys? Questions, concerns? The only other thing I can show you on this side, this does run 2 different belts behind the guard here. It does have its own 24 volt alternator located up here, which ran off the inner belt. And keep your hands away from the fan while it's moving. We want to keep our fingers and everything else in here. This fan runs at about 1800 RPM constantly. It does not come on, come off. It's not electronically controlled. It is run straight off the crank. So we want to make sure that we keep our hands and everything else away from here. We want to keep trash out of here. We want to keep, you know, everything in here, because anything going through that fan can break those fan guards and break the thing. And then you have stuff shooting through the radiator that you got pulling all over the place. So we want to make sure we keep the area around the generator nice and clean. That way we're not sucking up anything into here. even leaves, twigs, things like that can cause havoc later on. We just don't want to get the radiator blocked and all the fins blocked up. Well, as you can see, this unit actually is sealed. There is no spots, there is no openings in the generator itself. Everything, they've actually gotten a lot better over the last probably 2-3 years with their enclosures as far as not giving space for rodents to get in. There's really no openings across the whole thing.
So would this be something that we would have to do a PM on?
What do you mean by PM?
PM, like a monthly thing, like our...
Yeah, I would come check the hours. Obviously, you're going to want to log the hours, things like that.
Okay.
Just give it a look over. Make sure you don't see any fluids on top of the tank. Make sure you don't see anything leaking from anywhere. Just quick check on the oil level. You can get a flashlight up here. You can't see up there. If you guys take a look back this way, you see up there, there's a little hexagon shape up there. Now, when it is a little darker, you can't see it a little better. Once you close the doors and shine a flashlight, you will see the blue hue in that sight glass up there. All right. Coolant drain is here, down here at the bottom underneath. There is a little coolant drain, a little spigot down there. You ever do need to drain the cooling system out for whatever reason, doing a service on it, coolant drain is down there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Go around to the back. Fuel fill is here. This little 5-gallon spill containment. So when it is being fueled, it can be. Normally this size tank would be filled by a tanker. Because you are a 404-gallon tank. Typically, we like to see the fuel obviously between 85 and 90% most of the time. We don't want to see it drop to that 40, 50, 60% level. Any kind of space you leave in there, leave space for condensation, leave space for water to build up, and water to get in your fuel. So that's why we always recommend between 85 and 90. If it gets down to 70, 75%, always recommend topping it off, getting it up to that between 85 and 90% mark. Tank vent, things like this is the vent. This is just to keep the pressure equalized in the system. These are emergency vents. If this ever gets blocked and there's too much pressure in the tank, these are going to come up. These actually are very heavy duty and they are even hard to pull up. They're just spring loaded, but they will equalize the pressure. There is a fuel gauge down here. This is just a analog fuel gauge just for your guys to read when you guys are fueling the unit. We will go over the load bank eventually. Any questions back here? On the side? All right. We will be going over the load bank after we get finished going through the generator. The only thing is to show you guys the controls on the load bank, I actually have to turn the unit on. Because the controller does not get power unless the load bank is turned on, unless the generator is running. So, let's keep on moving. So we don't have a whole lot on this side. We have our oil drain here, which does come out to a handy little port down there, so it makes it nice and easy for oil changes, things like that. There's an oil drain here, and it does have a valve here right off the bottom of the oil pan, right down there. It makes it very easy and convenient. Air intake, like I said, this has an intercooler, which is located here. These are all air lines. Okay, these are not coolant lines, these are air lines. So when it comes in through the turbo, comes in, goes down, comes out the top, back into the intake here. This is ECM controlled. This does have a computer for its brain, so everything is controlled through there. Batteries are located on this side. There are 2 Group 31 batteries located down in here. Recommended life on these batteries is going to be every 3 years. They are under constant charge, and the controller is constantly using them to power up everything on the unit. The generator also does power up the RSA that is inside the annunciator, so it does draw power from there. So these are under constant charge, which is why we always recommend every 3 years. Car batteries I know can last probably anywhere from 5 to 6 years, but with this, these are under constant use. and they are located right here. They go straight to posts. There are no big battery posts. These are threaded rod posts. So we always want to make sure when you are replacing them, that's the best way to go. You guys can see it in there. They are Kohler branded batteries. So this is right behind here, but if you guys want to sneak in and see this, I'll go on the other side. You guys can sneak in on this side. So this is what we call a CCV filter right here. All right. So this is a system that coming off the top of the crank, coming up off the top. This is going to collect all of the, I don't know, have you guys seen old generators where you have a bunch of stuff coming out the top of the engine, where it kind of leaks all over the tank, or spits it out the back, things like that? Well, this is called a CCV filter, crankcase ventilation system. So what this does, this collects all that stuff that comes off the top of the crankcase, and it collects it here, goes through a filter, and any kind of fluid, oil that's going to be coming down there is actually going to drain back in, and it's going to go through a filter and drain out here. This is going to be kind of just vapor. But this stuff, any liquid, will get drained back down into the actual crank, into the sump. Four latches, it'll pull down. Here's the filter. In there. Very easy to change, very easy to look, very easy to maintain. The biggest thing, if you start seeing fluid down at the bottom of the tank coming out of this, that means your unit's probably wet stacking, more than likely, and pushing oil out. We don't want to see a bunch of oil coming out of here. That just means it's getting too much. I'm going to go back to saying we always want to run the engine under load if possible. More load on a diesel engine is better. We want it to get hot and burn off all the stuff all the contaminants that are in diesel. Air filters here. One clamp here. It's going to have a clamp around the end where it goes in. There is a gauge with these walls. It's hard to see it, but if you go to the other door and look in, you can see a gauge, a restriction gauge on there, showing you if it's been restricted. Now, if you get a ladder, jump up, you can actually see the pleats on the air filter. You can see how dirty it is or how dirty it isn't, just based on here. And the cleaner the area is around the generator, obviously the cleaner the air filter is going to be. Battery chargers here. This is a 120. It's a straight plug-in battery charger. This is, like I said, tied directly to the controller, telling you the charging amperage and everything else with it. So if we were to unplug this, wait for the alarm. A little bit of a delay. Come on. Still have a delay. That's the battery charger fault. So if anything does happen to the battery charger, it's going to you as well. You don't need to clear that. You just simply have to get power back to the battery charger. It'll clear itself out. But that is something kind of nice with the way the new battery chargers tie into the controls. That way we don't have to run extra wiring to it. We don't have to do anything. It just constantly monitors it just through a plug here on the battery charger. This is a Soot Alert. This is for the DPF that is located on top of the unit. Because this is a school, it does require a DPF unit with the newer EPA standards and things like that. The Soot Alert is a monitoring system that monitors the pressure and the temperature of the DPF. Another reason why I keep bringing up keeping load on the generator, in order for the DPF to work properly and to filter things out, it needs to get hot. So the more load you put on it, the better. Every year, I know you guys probably do load banks on your units. With these, we need to get them over 700 degrees to burn out all the soot and carbon that's in there, to clean them out. 700 degrees is the minimum. Typically, this unit will run probably about 900 degrees at close to full load. If we're running no load, you're probably running about 300-400 degrees, as opposed to running full load, you're probably running about 900 degrees. On here, you can see marked the pressure. So pressure, if the unit is run with no load for an extended amount of time, it's going to build up soot. It's not going to burn it off. It's going to build up pressure, and the pressure is going to start to build. So this is based on water column. You can see there is a copper line that's run straight up from here all the way up to the inlet onto the DPF. So this is going to constantly, when it runs, this doesn't do anything until you basically run the unit. Once it starts seeing pressure. Option 1 right here, you can see on the screen, we're going to hit 1. It's going to tell you your inches of water column and your temperature. Like right now, it's still reading 87 degrees on the exhaust. So as you run this, you'll see the temperature go up, you'll see the water column go up. Warning is at 23, alarm is at 27 inches of water column. The absolute maximum pressure is 29.9 inches water column. As you apply load to this, it will help the pressure come down because it's going to burn off the soot. So, which is why we have the load bank on here, obviously, because we want to run that as much as possible. Whenever the units run, we'd like to run the load bank as well. Except in, of course, in an emergency situation. In an emergency situation, we just want the unit to run back in the building and do what it needs to do. But this has a very loud alarm. Way louder than the generator. You will hear it from across, probably not across the parking lot because this does have a soundproofing, but you can hear it probably from outside the enclosure when this goes off. Okay? So, load, load, load. We want to run the generator with load. That's the biggest thing I can tell you guys. For the health of the engine, for the health of the DPF that's sitting up there, the cleanest DPFs are ones that are run under load. Because when they're not, we've got to come in, we've got to take covers off, we've got to have a company come in, basically clean out the DPF, take the filters out, take them out and clean them. That can get costly every year. Load banking is important. This does have a regen feature on it, so once we'll come in and load bank, gets above that 700 degrees, we hit the regen button, and it runs takes about 4 to 5 hours to regen the system at that temperature. The hotter it gets, the quicker it's going to regen, the quicker it's going to burn off all the soot in the system. Any questions on this guy? All right. This is your load bank breaker. We're waiting on a cover to put over this. We had to order a new one. This is your load bank breaker. This is what controls the load bank. So when the unit's running, if this breaker is on when the unit's running, it's going to power up the load bank. Now, there is a control box. It's a digital control box. That does not come on until we have the breaker on and run the unit. There's no external power source for the load bank. It is powered directly from the unit itself. And I would like to go over with you guys how to operate that. I got some earplugs that I have in the truck that I can bring out if we want, and I can show you guys how to operate the load bank controller. It will get loud, very loud, but I want to make sure everybody understands how to operate all the equipment on the unit before I take off out of here. Any questions over here? We do have an extra plug here. In case you need to come out here, do anything out here, plug anything in, we do have a plug here.
If you're testing the unit with load within housing, do you have to have the load bank on for that still? No, right? As long as you switch to
yeah, if you guys are carrying load,
yeah.
Depending on what your percentage is,
right.
your load percentage is, you can always supplement it with the load bank.
Right.
So let's say you're only at 5% load.
Yeah.
And you want to, this load bank will only go up to 50%. So this is about 50% of your actual load. So that's a 200 kW load bank. This is a 400 kW generator. So realistically, you could probably put all the load on here because your building's probably not going to pull 50%, I'm assuming.
Interesting.
So
we can check that when you start it up, right? If we transfer load, or is it
if we transfer load, yeah, it can be determined. I can see the percentage right there on the screen.
Yeah. Later on.
Yeah. Questions? Concerns? Problems? You guys want to go inside and check out the ATS, the annunciator, things like that? Start moving on. Oh, here's the other shutoff valve for the block heater, by the way. It's located right on top of the block here. You can see it's not long handles. They don't want people coming in here bumping them or doing anything like that, shutting them off, because that could back up the block heater and burn the block heater out if that is fluid's not constantly flowing through. Good? All right, smooth.